What is going on, all you bus nuts, geeks, and enthusiasts out there? Welcome to another episode of Motorcoach World. My name is James. I can't tell you guys how many times I've had people say to me, "Oh, you drive a bus? Dude, I wish I had your job. I mean, all you do is sit all day and drive. I mean, I could do what you do with my eyes closed." Well, I hate to break it to you, but a very critical part of the job requires you to keep your eyes open as well as keeping them on the road. But the multiple individuals that have made this really ignorant comment to me over the years aren't completely wrong. Making sure you have enough time to keep your eyes shut is also a very critical part of the job. That's right, believe it or not, as a motor coach driver, making sure you have enough time off the job is a huge part of the job. I feel like I'm saying job too much. In fact, not getting enough time off of driving the coach bus as well as catering to your passengers can not only cost you a fine, your license, but also as well as your job. In the US, the FMCSA, or the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, enforces strict guidelines as to how much a coach bus driver can drive, how much on-duty time they're allowed when not driving, and how much time they have to have off before they're allowed to hit the road again. The rule is motor coach drivers can't drive more than 10 hours following a consecutive 8 hours off. And motor coach drivers also can't be on duty for more than 15 hours following a consecutive 8 hours off. So let's break that dry bit of language down so that it's a little easier to understand. As a motor coach driver, you have 10 hours to drive your people to where they need to get to, and then you have to have 8 hours of uninterrupted off-duty time. And you can only be on duty for a maximum of 15 hours until you need to have 8 hours of uninterrupted off-duty time. So what is on-duty time? Well, on-duty time is basically any time that you're doing something job-related. The 15 hours of on-duty time includes the 10 hours of drive time, which means while you're driving your coach, not only are you burning through your 10 hours of drive time, but also your 15 hours of on-duty time. When you're driving, you are on duty. I mean, you're doing something that's job-related. But when you're not driving, but still catering to your passengers, such as loading luggage or maybe cleaning up the bus after your passengers have disembarked or doing a pre-trip inspection, you're using up your 15 hours of on-duty time, but not your drive time because you're not driving. Aside from your job as a motor coach driver from your bus company, a driver's on-duty time even includes other places a driver might work at. So, for example, if Joe, the motor coach driver, has a job as a ballerina during the day. Actually, I think male ballet dancers are called ballerinos. I don't know why I know this fact. And then after 8 hours of dancing, Joe goes to his other job to drive a motor coach. Well, Joe would only have 7 hours of on-duty time left as a motor coach operator when he reports to work at the bus garage. And since driving time also counts as being on duty, Joe would only be able to drive for 7 hours before having to stop and go off duty for the next 8 hours before Joe could do anything that involves the bus. Now, if Joe wanted to work on his pliés during his 8 hours of mandatory off-duty time for his upcoming ballet recital, this technically would not qualify as having 8 hours of uninterrupted off-duty time because technically Joe is working for his other job and not resting. Now technically Joe could get away with spending his 8 hours off in the hotel room practicing his ballet moves and not logging it. I mean, who would know, right? But then Joe would have to really ask himself, is this really safe for his passengers? And is this really good for the bus company that he works at? But if Joe had an alternative job such as a data logger or over-the-phone salesman, and Joe decided to work these other jobs while in the hotel room during his 8 hours off, and let's say Joe gets into an accident the next day, a DOT auditor would easily find out that Joe was not really off-duty during his 8 hours of mandatory off-duty time based on phone call records and emails and etc. Whether the accident was caused by Joe dozing off at the wheel or completely not Joe's fault, DOT will be pulling all kinds of records to figure out what the CDL motor coach driver was doing before the accident occurred. Now, with that said, there are also weekly driving limits. If a bus company doesn't operate every day of the week, drivers cannot exceed 60 hours in any 7 consecutive days. But if they're on the road daily, that limit extends to 70 hours in any 8 consecutive days. A motor coach company can decide which rule they want to use. They have the freedom to choose what works best for their drivers and their operations. In simpler terms, if a company runs its vehicles every day of the week, they can choose to follow a rule that allows their drivers to work up to 70 hours in 8 days. However, it's entirely up to them, and they can decide which rule each driver follows. Off-duty time is crucial for the rest that a driver needs. A driver can show him or herself off-duty when the driver is not obligated to do anything for work. And in order to have the full 10 hours of driving and the full 15 hours of on-duty time available for the driver the next day, the driver has to show 8 hours of uninterrupted off-duty time. In certain cases, a driver can be known to cheat his or her logs, either because the company the driver works for asked the driver to do unethical practices, or the group the driver is carrying asked the drivers to bend the rules a little bit for their convenience. For example, if a group chartered a bus and sends the bus company an itinerary asking them to get to the hotel at 10 p.m. at night and then wants to get back on the road the next morning at 6 a.m., well, that's exactly 8 hours off. So it's all good and legal, right? Well, a bus company that values safety would say no to a group of passengers asking to do this, because if you think about it, the driver needs half an hour after dropping off their group to do a post-trip, and then at least half an hour before picking the group up to do a pre-trip in the morning. Not to mention, even if the driver does have exactly 8 hours off, by the time the driver has shut off his or her bus and checked into the hotel room, and assuming that the driver values his or her hygiene and, takes a shower and brushed their teeth before and after going to bed, the driver will have at most 6 hours of sleep by the time he or she is done with all of this. Is it technically legal? I mean, yes, a bus company can get away with taking on jobs like this and passing an audit from the FMCSA. And yes, the records will look like the bus company followed all the rules. But in the end, it's the driver that suffers from this type of really tight itineraries and decisions from management. And I hope the managers and owners of the bus company can sleep well at night, knowing that they have fatigued drivers driving their customers around at interstate speeds for 10 hours the next day with only 5 or 6 hours of sleep because they allowed these type of tight itineraries to take place. Now, sometimes doing the right thing falls on the driver. I mean, even if the managers back at the office holds the group to these high standards while they book these type of trips, the passengers may still decide to knock on the driver's hotel room door while the driver is trying to get his or her 8 hours of uninterrupted off-duty time. Knock, knock, knock. Hey, can you just drive us down the street to the Walmart? We just want to get a few things. That's actually happened to me countless times when I went on over-the-night trips, or even something as minor as sending me a text asking me to unlock the bus so that someone can get something they left on the bus at 1:30 a.m. in the morning.
Captain Kirk, will you please join me on the bridge?
Spock, I'm really tired.
Captain Kirk?
Now, being a driver and hoping to maintain a friendly atmosphere with my passengers for the next 4 to 5 days, and understanding that my tip at the end of this long trip will depend on what the group thinks of me, it's a very tough spot to be in when this kind of situation happens. If you as a driver give in to these requests, technically it's illegal. And some may think that it's no big deal just to get out of bed to drive down the street for 15 minutes so that someone can get a soda, or walking out to the parking lot to open up the bus for a few minutes and hopping back into bed. But understand that that 15 minutes could easily turn into an hour as the passengers get caught up in their late night browsing at a Walmart, and that walking out to the bus and back could really affect your sleep rhythm. Now, what I personally do to avoid these type of situations, and what I advise the drivers at Peoria Charter, which is the company I work at, is to set boundaries before things like this happens. Before dropping off my group at the hotel at night, I always take the time to make an announcement pointing out that legally, my log requires me to have 8 hours of uninterrupted off-duty time. I also mentioned that our buses are equipped with electronic logging devices and cameras so that I can't really sneak on board without my company knowing. So please make sure to grab everything you need for the night because I will not be able to come out to let you back on the bus. Now, if it's an absolute emergency, I will come out and let you on, but it will be 8 hours after that point before I can continue tomorrow's portion of the trip. So in the interest of keeping all of you on time and on schedule tomorrow, please make sure you have everything you need from the bus before I lock it down for the night. Now, I always keep these announcements lighthearted and non-threatening so that I don't come across abrasive or authoritative. Trust me, that goes a long way. But keep in mind, sometimes even after making these announcements, people will still knock on your door in the middle of the night to ask you to get a teddy bear out of the bus or something.
Sorry to wake you, sir.
You have hearing problems, mister.
No, sir.
Also, if your group doesn't need your services at all the next day, then by all means, be as accommodating as possible for them since you as a driver will not have to worry about running out of service hours the next day. Now, in the past, drivers completed their log on DOT certified logbooks. These books will have several categories where the driver can draw lines across, simulating their day. There were several categories that the driver could move their line upwards or downwards to indicate what they were doing, such as off-duty time, driving, on-duty not driving, and sleeper berth, which indicates when a driver uses an onboard sleeper berth to sleep instead of a hotel room. Now, this is typically used for truckers and motor coaches outfitted with driver sleeping chambers, such as entertainer coaches, and very rarely found on board coach buses operating in North America. Today, the driver's logbooks have been completely replaced by the ELD, which stands for electronic logging device. The ELD mandate was announced by the FMCSA in early 2014 and required motor coaches to use ELDs instead of their paper logbooks for their drivers by December of 2017. The ELD made it more difficult for drivers and sometimes companies with poor ethics to kind of fudge their logbooks in order to make more money and drive trips that exceed the driver's service hours. Today, there are several ELD providers for trucks and motor coaches, as well as other over-the-road vehicles that require electronic logging devices. Some of the most common ones are by companies such as Samsara, Big Roads, and the one that Pure Charter uses, which is Omnitrax. It's worth mentioning that purchasing ELD logging devices to install on a fleet costs significantly more than keeping a supply of logbooks for drivers in the office. Aside from the upfront cost of buying the electronic equipment, it also incurs a monthly cost as well as labor costs to install them so that they can talk with the vehicle. Some companies provide tablets along with the ELD devices so that the drivers don't have to supply their own device in order to use the ELD while on the jobs. Most ELD systems do allow drivers to download an app and manage their ELDs on their smartphones. Now keep in mind, sometimes these ELD devices will break, and so the FMCSA does allow for drivers to switch to paper logbooks in the event that the ELD malfunctions. Here at Pure Charter, we do ask our drivers to always keep an old paper logbook with them, and we also keep a spare paper logbook in the overhead compartment of all of our buses, just in case the ELD software or the actual device stops working in the middle of a trip. Personal conveyance refers to a situation where a driver uses their commercial vehicle, or in our case, the motor coach, for personal reasons, like going to grab a meal or running a quick errand during off-duty hours. Now, there are specific rules and guidelines set by the FMCSA regarding personal conveyance. Generally, personal conveyance cannot be used for the benefit of the carrier or the driver's employer. It's strictly for personal use. So if you're off duty and decide to go use the bus to grab a bite to eat, that's personal conveyance. But if your company asks you to pick up supplies for a trip, that's considered work-related and doesn't fall under personal conveyance. Over the years, I've seen many bus and trucking companies tell their drivers to use personal conveyance on their logs in order for them to be able to finish their trip. I've also heard of many drivers from other bus companies complain that they have been on personal conveyance while carrying passengers for most of the day due to the fact that their employer has sent them on back-to-back trips that cause them to go way over on their legal driving hours. Now, guys and gals, if you drive for a company that asks you as the driver to abuse your log like this, I would look into working for a different carrier really quickly. Imagine this, you're on a long haul trip, everything's going smoothly, and suddenly you hit unexpected delays like road closures or severe weather.
We're not gonna make it, are we?
That's where emergency hour allowance come into play. In certain emergency situations, the FMCSA allows a driver to exceed their normal hours of service limits in order to ensure the safety and well-being of their passengers. However, it's crucial to document these emergency hours properly and only use them when absolutely necessary. Safety should always be the top priority, even in emergency situations. Folks, I hope today's video helped all of you gain a better understanding of how drivers have to manage their time and how it all works. But before I end today's video, I want to let you all know that something really big is happening in my life and here at Pura Charter, and it's going to happen in the next few days. So I will be releasing an announcement revealing the big news soon. I'm super excited, so stay tuned for that. And as always, if you're watching this, you are part of the Motorcoach world.